You wake up when your body is ready. No alarm, no snooze button, no glowing screen telling you that you're already late. For most of human history, this wasn't a fantasy. This was simply Tuesday. For roughly 300,000 years, humans slept without mattresses, without pillows, without a single scheduled hour. And somehow, they woke up, rested. So how did that actually work? Start with the ground itself. Your ancestors didn't sleep on bare dirt as often as you might think. In 2011, archaeologist Lynn Wadley and her team excavated Sibudu Cave in South Africa and found something remarkable. Layered bedding made from sedge and rush plants, some of it dated to around 200,000 years ago. That's not a pile of leaves someone kicked together. It's a built surface, replaced and refreshed over time, sometimes even layered with aromatic leaves that likely repelled insects. In plain terms, ancient humans were engineering mattresses long before anyone imagined a factory. Think about what that means practically. Bedding isn't just softness. Insulation is the real function. A body loses heat quickly against bare stone or packed earth, and losing heat all night is exhausting even if you never fully wake up. By stacking plant material into a raised mat, that heat loss slowed dramatically. Layer after layer, replaced whenever it got old or infested, generation after generation. This wasn't a one-time discovery either. Wadley's team found repeated bedding layers stacked over thousands of years at the same site, meaning this wasn't a lucky accident stumbled on once. It was knowledge, passed down and refined. The same way you might pass down a recipe. That single detail rewrites the picture. This wasn't survival by accident. It was comfort, deliberately designed, tested against a hostile climate for millennia before anyone wrote a word down. But bedding only explains where you slept. It doesn't explain when. This is where a 2015 study led by UCLA neuroscientist Jerome Siegel becomes essential. Siegel's team studied 3 modern hunter-gatherer and forager societies that still live largely without electricity: the Hadza of Tanzania, the San of Namibia, and the Tsimane of Bolivia. These groups aren't literally ancient humans, but their sleep environment is close enough to the ancestral one to be revealing. Researchers tracked their sleep using small wrist devices that record movement and rest cycles. What they found broke almost every assumption people carry about natural sleep. These groups didn't sleep more than people in industrialized nations. They averaged around 6 to 6.5 hours a night. They didn't have a fixed bedtime either. They went to sleep hours after sunset, not immediately when it got dark, and woke before sunrise, not with it. There was no universal ancestral bedtime waiting to be rediscovered. Sleep flexed with temperature, season, and the rhythm of the group around them. Here's the detail that reframes everything. Temperature, not darkness, seemed to govern when people actually fell asleep. Body temperature naturally drops in the hours before sleep, and these groups tended to fall asleep as the ambient temperature was dropping too, syncing an internal biological process with an external environmental one. Darkness set the stage. Cooling temperature pulled the trigger. This matters because it contradicts almost every piece of modern sleep advice you've ever heard. You've probably been told that darkness is the single most important cue for sleep, so dim the lights, block the windows, remove every source of glow. Siegel's data suggests darkness alone was never enough for your ancestors. It was the falling temperature after sunset, not the disappearance of light, that told the body it was time to power down. In a world before climate control, that cue was reliable every single night. In your bedroom, with a thermostat holding the temperature dead flat at 70 degrees, that cue barely exists anymore. There's another detail worth sitting with. None of these 3 groups reported anything resembling chronic insomnia, despite having no mattresses, no blackout curtains, and no white noise machines. Whatever was keeping them from the kind of sleep struggles common in industrialized nations, it wasn't equipment, it was rhythm. Now, picture it directly. You're lying near the last embers of a fire. The heat of the day has finally broken. Around you, a few members of your group are already asleep. Others are still murmuring quietly, and someone is half listening for danger. There's no single moment where everyone goes to bed. People drift off in a loose, staggered rhythm, and that staggering wasn't accidental. It meant someone was almost always semi-alert. A group where everyone sleeps in the same deep window at the same time is a group with no one watching the dark. This staggered pattern connects to something historian Roger Ekirch uncovered while studying pre-industrial European sleep records. Ekirch found extensive documentation, court records, diaries, and medical texts describing something called segmented sleep, a first sleep, a waking period in the middle of the night used for prayer, conversation, or quiet tasks, and then a second sleep before dawn. This pattern persisted in parts of Europe until the widespread adoption of artificial lighting in the 1800s made a single consolidated sleep block more practical and more profitable for a working day. Notice how far this pushes the pattern. Ekirch's records are only a few centuries old, but they describe roughly the same shape Siegel found among modern hunter-gatherer groups on the other side of the world, with no contact between them and no shared culture. Two very different lines of evidence, one from written archives in Europe, one from wearable sensors in Tanzania, Namibia, and Bolivia, pointing in the same direction. Segmented, flexible sleep doesn't look like a quirk of one place or one era. It looks like what happens whenever artificial light and rigid schedules aren't there to flatten it out. That's the twist most people don't expect. Broken sleep isn't a modern sleep disorder. For much of human history, it was the default. If you've ever woken at 3 in the morning and panicked that something is wrong with you, the science suggests you may simply be running an operating system that's 300,000 years old, dropped into a world engineered for a single, unbroken block of rest. So, what actually kept ancient sleep functional without a fixed schedule? Three things, working together. A cooling environment as the trigger. A social group providing staggered vigilance instead of one person guarding everyone. And prepared bedding, like the layers found at Sibudu Cave, that insulated the body from cold ground and biting insects well enough to make deep, restorative sleep possible in the first place. Remove any one piece, and the system breaks down. A lone human, sleeping deeply on bare, cold ground, with nobody watching, wouldn't survive many nights. The group was not a comfort. It was the actual sleep technology. This is also why total darkness and total silence, the two things modern sleep advice obsesses over, weren't the ancestral norm at all. Ancient sleep happened near a low fire, with ambient noise from insects, wind, and other people. Silence wasn't safety. Silence could mean something had gone wrong. Now bring it back to you. You live in a world engineered for consolidated sleep. Electric light pushed bedtimes later. Alarm clocks forced wake-ups earlier. Air conditioning and heating flattened the temperature cues your body used to rely on. And you likely sleep alone, or with one other person, with no one else's staggered wakefulness to lean on, which may be part of why a strange house or an unfamiliar noise can wreck a night's sleep so completely. Your nervous system is still running a threat detection system built for a campfire circle, not a bedroom with a locked door and 4 walls. That doesn't mean the ancestral way was better in every sense. 6 hours of fragmented, temperature-triggered, group-monitored sleep worked because it had to work. It kept people alive long enough to reproduce, not necessarily rested in the way you'd choose if you had the option of a quiet room and a mattress. Evolution doesn't optimize for feeling great. It optimizes for surviving the night. Consider what your ancestors didn't have to deal with too. No blue light from a phone screen delaying the release of melatonin, the hormone that signals to your brain that it's time to wind down. No caffeine at 3 in the afternoon overriding the natural dip in alertness that would otherwise ease you toward evening tiredness. No emails arriving at 11 at night carrying tomorrow's stress into tonight's rest. Ancient sleep faced real threats: cold, predators, hunger, but almost none of the self-inflicted disruptions that now sit on your nightstand. And yet the core hardware hasn't changed. Your temperature still drops before sleep. Your brain still treats an unfamiliar environment as something to stay half alert to. Waking in the small hours still isn't automatically a sign that something has gone wrong with you. It might just be a very old habit surfacing in a very new setting, but there is something worth taking from it. The rigid idea that sleep must happen in one perfect, uninterrupted 8-hour block, at the exact same time every night, isn't ancient wisdom. It's a fairly recent invention, built around factory shifts and electric light. Waking briefly in the night isn't necessarily a malfunction. Falling asleep later than you should isn't necessarily a discipline problem. Your body may simply be doing what bodies have done for hundreds of thousands of years, waiting for the temperature to drop, waiting for the environment to feel safe enough, and finally letting go. You wake up when your body is ready. For 300,000 years, that sentence described nearly every human who ever lived. Somewhere between the campfire and the alarm clock, it stopped being true. It doesn't have to stay that way.